The world of GameCube Homebrew is amazing. With tons of awesome homebrew available and new homebrew still being actively developed in 2019, the GameCube homebrew scene is still worth getting into today. So in this video, we're going to walk through how to get homebrew to run on your unmodified GameCube console, as well as my top 3 homebrew you absolutely have to try. So let's get started with some basics. Your ultimate goal should be to launch Swiss. Swiss is a front end for the GameCube that's akin to something like the Homebrew channel on the Wii. This is ultimately where you'll be able to execute all your homebrew, launch GameCube ISOs, and run any other handy utilities. So let's talk about how to launch Swiss. Realistically, there are 3 ways to do it. Number 1, use a save game exploit. Number 2, use an action replay. Or number 3, modify your console with a mod chip. As it relates to this video, we're only going to cover the action replay method, as this method does not require you to modify your system, and all items needed to do it are readily available on Amazon. However, it's worth noting that the easiest and cheapest method is to modify your console with a Xeno GC mod chip. You can typically find these on eBay for less than $10. I have a separate video on installing a Xeno GC mod chip, so if you want to check that out, check the card in the upper right hand corner. So let's get started. You're going to need an action replay disc and an SD media launcher, also known as an SD Gecko, and an SD card. The key with the SD card is it needs to be 2 GB or less and formatted in either FAT16 or FAT32. With those items in hand, let's navigate to the Swiss GitHub page and download the latest release of Swiss. From there, drop your SD card into your computer and copy over the swisscompressed.dol file from the zip onto the root of your SD card. With that copied over, let's head over to our GameCube. Place the SD card into the SD to memory card adapter and put that into memory card slot 1. From there, drop in your action replay disc into the system and power it up. You see the contents of your SD card in the action replay. From there, launch the swisscompressed.dol that we put on our SD card earlier. If you see Swiss boot up, congratulations, you're one step closer to launching some homebrew. Now I just want to mention a couple limitations here and how you can easily go about rectifying them. The first thing is going to be the size of the SD card. 2 GB is really small. Fortunately, once you're in Swiss, you can hit B and get to the lower menu and then press the eject button to eject your SD card from your SD media launcher. From there, you can replace it with a much larger SD card, and then you can go ahead and launch any of your homebrew or GameCube ISOs off of there. Now, the one other thing I'd like to point out is if you have an SD to SP2, you can just leave that into your serial port number 2 and go ahead and switch your device to there, and it won't require you to get off the couch. If you're curious about more information about the SD to SP2, make sure you check out the previous video I've done on it, card in the upper right hand corner. The other topic I just want to very briefly touch on is why you would still use a GameCube, and the answer is really twofold. Number 1, it does offer a slightly sharper video picture as compared to a Wii, and number 2, it has native Game Boy Advance support through the Game Boy player. This is going to become absolutely crucial as we walk into our first piece of homebrew, which is the Game Boy Interface. So any homebrew that you want to add, it's super easy. Just drag and drop the respective homebrew onto the root of your SD card, or whatever file folder you want to put it into, and then navigate into Swiss and launch that piece of homebrew. Game Boy Interface, or GBI, is a free alternative to the Game Boy Player startup disc originally offered by Nintendo. It comes in 3 flavors: standard, high fidelity, and speedrunning. For my purposes, the standard edition works just fine. I'm going to put Super Mario Advance into my GBA player and boot it up. Perhaps my favorite part of this is the bevy of options made available to you before you even boot up the game. This includes all kinds of video options to customize the experience to your liking. Further, the author of this homebrew, Extremes, has taken measures to take significant amounts of lag out of the software. This lag was present in Nintendo's original release, and it's an absolute treat to see that this is actually a better version than what was originally released by Nintendo. The other thing I really like is that since the hardware is based off original GBA hardware, things like your SD flash cards still work. While there are GBA emulators for the GameCube, The nice thing about doing it this way is you know you're not going to get any slowdown or any other ill effects that might be the result of emulation. Next up is CleanRip. This is a utility that allows you to rip and make backups of your GameCube games. Really cool about this homebrew is, after the rip is complete, it uses the DAT file from redump.org to perform a checksum validation against known good game images. This tells you right away if your rip is good. Now, the DVD drive on the GameCube isn't the fastest, and it takes about 20 minutes or so to rip a game. However, to me, it's worth it just to save the wear and tear on the laser. What's really nice is the homebrew was recently updated to include support for the SD to SP2, which means that you can easily rip games to your SD card plugged into serial port number 2. So I'm going to rip my copy of F-Zero GX, which, if you have not played, is probably one of the best F-Zero entries in this series. But as you can see, the game easily rips to the root of the SD card, and we're able to easily launch it from there using Swiss. So as previously mentioned, there are emulators for the GameCube, and there are a bunch of them. Examples include the Sega Master System, Sega Game Gear, Sega Genesis, Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, NES, Super NES, and TurboGrafx-16, just to name a few. While my experiences have been good with all these emulators, I'm going to showcase the port of SNES 9X for the GameCube, along with Castlevania X. Adding Homebrew to the SD card is just as simple as dragging the Homebrew to your SD card. Now, the one thing I would like to point out here is if you plan to use the SD to SP2, the Homebrew does not currently read ROMs from the SD to SD2 port. So make sure you place your ROMs on the SD card that goes into your SD Media Launcher. Once inside the Homebrew, navigate to the ROM folder and launch your game. I really like all the options that SNES 9X has, and it allows you to really tailor your experience to your liking. And it even includes some great quality of life benefits, such as save states. But hopefully, as you can see here, the game looks fantastic in 480p and plays really well too. So like I said, Homebrew on the GameCube is absolutely awesome still in 2019. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. What Homebrew did I miss? What should I check out that I might not have seen before? Leave your comments below, and I look forward to reading them. With all that being said, guys, I want to thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you for the next one here soon.